I want to go through a quick video that perhaps will explain my thinking about election a little bit better. And I'm going to show you essentially the same graphic in respect to both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Now you've seen something like this before. The red circle I'm calling the elect, and of course since we're talking about the Old Testament, it refers only to Israelites, those who were not Gentiles, but Israelites. They were the elect of Yahweh. Now, what did that mean? Well, it meant that they alone had lone access to truth about Yahweh. It also meant that Yahweh promised them certain covenant blessings. They would honor the covenant that He entered with them to be His people, and He would be their God. And that relationship was signified by circumcision. Okay, that is the rite that marked the elect, and it had meaning for both males and females. I won't rabbit trail on why that's the case. Within the elect, you have the believers, okay, those among the elect who actually believe, they have faith in Yahweh, and they remain loyal to Yahweh. They do not apostatize. They remain believing. They trust in the promises, and they hope to receive them. Again, either in this life or the next life, for sure. Now, with respect to the believers within the elect, again, so those two things are not synonymous. All who follow Yahweh were elect, okay, because the saved are the subset of the elect, but not all the elect follow Yahweh. So you can have many who are elect who are not saved because they do not believe. Israelites who believed are the true Israel, according to Paul in Romans 9, 6 through 8. This is the true remnant whom Yahweh acted in history to preserve out of the elect. And there are a couple references there in Isaiah 10, 19 through 22, and again Romans 9 again, verse 27. Lastly, though it might be difficult to see the remnant as predestinated, at the very least, their survival is cast as a sovereign act of God. God will ensure that His plans are not thwarted by humankind. He will have a remnant. There will be those among the elect and who, from the outside, the Gentile, join in the elect in the Old Testament context and who believe. He will have a saved remnant. That is His will, and He's going to make sure that it comes to pass. Again, we may or may not agree that there's predestinated language associated with that in the Old Testament, or that we need to associate that, but at the very least, it's a sovereign act of God. Now let's see how this moves over and translates into the New Testament. Here the elect are not just Jews, in my view. They are Jews and Gentiles. Now you could say that the elect here is the church, but of course I'm going to have a subset of saved, and so that might trouble some of you. But if you take the view that we have a mirror imaging here in the New Testament, and I think there's sound reasoning for that, the church, which has, as the Gospels would say, this kingdom of God has wheat and tares in it. You have a body of elect, just like you did in the Old Testament. They're the ones that have access to the truth about the gospel. You see how this would fit in a covenantal system of theology, whereas you had infants circumcised in the Old Testament, and they were elect because they were members of the elect body. But still they had to believe. Same thing could be said here. We have infants in that system. That application might be a better way to say it, of this theology, where they're put into the body of the elect, and they're still responsible to believe, but nevertheless they are members of that body. If you remember back when I posted about infant baptism, how you could understand infant baptism biblically so that it's not confused with salvation. This is going to go hand in glove with that. Baptism would simply put you into the corporate body of elect. You had access to the truth, the gospel. You had that inheritance, and especially if you believed, you would become the true Israel. You would become the true followers of Abraham. Again, this is signified and sort of revealed or manifested by baptism. Baptism having no connection to salvation as far as some sort of cause and effect. The saved are those who actually believe and keep believing in the gospel. Now, you could have people grow up within the elect, the church, who are part of the elect body, the church, which is the new Israel, but they still have to believe to be saved. And they can't apostatize. There's no one who goes to heaven who is not a believer. Okay? You have to believe. You must believe the gospel. So we see this interplay going on here between the Old and New Testament. Now, we could talk a little bit later maybe about how if you didn't have a covenantal view of the relationship between the two testaments, if you rejected infant baptism, that sort of thing, there's certainly a way to articulate this from that perspective as well, because you could have adults, just like you had Gentiles, we'll use that analogy. You could have adults come into the community who are not baptized at all, but yet they have access by coming to the church, they hear the gospel, they believe, and then afterwards as adults they could receive the sign of membership, which is baptism as an adult. And the mode is insignificant. It's irrelevant. You could use any mode and have this system work. I'm just trying to get you to see the mirror imaging between Israel and the church in the New Testament, and between what I'm trying to say about election in the Old Testament and election in the New Testament. In each case, the saved are a subset of the elect, because all the elect means is access to the truth, access to the gospel. Now, in regard to the saved in the New Testament, all who follow Christ were elect, just like Romans 8 says, because again, they're the subset. But not all the elect will follow Christ. Not all who are in this position of receiving the truth about the gospel are going to believe it and follow Christ. These believers, like their Old Testament counterparts, are the true Israel. So the true Israel is the believing Jew and the believing Gentile. They are the true family of God. That language is appropriate since they've inherited the promises given to Abraham per Galatians 3. Now, Romans 11:5 very plainly says that God had determined in New Testament times, as in the Old Testament, to save a remnant. Romans 11:5 says very plainly, so too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. Romans 8 marries this believing remnant idea to predestination pretty clearly. You might argue more clearly than the Old Testament, but again, I'm trying to just pare away to the essentials here without getting into the details too heavily. But you see, I hope, how the Old and New Testaments are mirroring each other, how Israel and the church mirror each other. It's not that they're completely identical. It's not that they don't have any uncommon features. The idea is that they are quite analogous, and they're intended to be analogous, and they're described as analogous in the New Testament. And with that, the idea of election, again, as I'm articulating it, that election is the big circle, and the believers, the saved, are a subset of the elect. That works in both testaments. So hopefully this will either help clarify or stimulate more questions so I can keep working on this and be more precise.